Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today's terrorism show is going to be a little bit different since all the breaking news from last night in Armenia. We have a war on our hands, folks, so we're going to be talking about that instead of our usual headlines about certain other little terrorism deals, but this one's huge. So, welcome, Brother Alexis, to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. And we'll add, I'll give you a teaser right now. At the end of the show, we're going to show the connection between Donald Trump and Jorge Mario Bergoglio and 9/11. Do you think these two guys have anything to do with 9/11? You'll be surprised to find out that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Indirectly, but quite close to what's going on. So first, the war in between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We're going to feature this, and we'll cover this war weekly because it's a war between a Christian country and an Islamic country. There have been odds for it for centuries. I think you'd have to probably say, but since the 7th century, Muslims have been attacking the Christian people of Armenia. So what do you want to start, AJ? You want me to do a little background story history, who the Armenians are?
Yeah.
The Armenians are one of the most ancient peoples that have inhabited the same land in the entire world. In the history of peoples, most nations migrate from one place to another through their histories and then end up where they are. For example, the Franks weren't originally in France, they were in Poland, and they came from Sweden. And the Russians weren't originally all over Siberia. They were originally a tribe from near St. Petersburg. And the English, there weren't any English. They're mixtures of the Angles and the Norsemen. And well, if you go back 4,000 or 5,000 years, the Armenians are still where they always were, in the high eastern mountains of what we now call Turkey, but geographically is called Asia Minor. And they're a mountain people with a strong ancient culture, strong family values, very religious people. They converted to Christianity in the beginning of the 3rd century. The whole kingdom became Christian. It's the first kingdom. And that was before Constantine, the emperor, became a Christian. And very devoted to St. George. And they've been Christian ever since, and they never accepted the Protestant Reformation. And they are represented by 2 churches. One church is the Armenian Catholic, and the other is called the Armenian Apostolic. The Apostolic Church you could call Orthodox, but they're not Orthodox in the sense that they're one of the churches that don't accept, I think it's Ephesus, okay. But they're a Christian church. So they've lived there high in the mountains. At one time, before about 2,000, 2,500 BC, they ruled half of what's called modern Turkey and all of Syria and Lebanon and northwest corner of Iran and all of Azerbaijan and all of Georgia. They were a big empire at one point in ancient times. They were a strong ally of the Romans. When the Romans were at war with the Persians along the Syrian frontiers, frequently Armenia would take the side with the Romans, and they became part of the Roman Empire towards the end. And then they were part of the Byzantine Empire, which was the Roman Empire in the east out of Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul. And they were strong fighters for the Byzantine army. Armenia is a beautiful land of high mountains, heath. It's not as wet as Scotland, but if it had a lot more rain, you would think it's like Scotland. It's more a drier environment like the Mediterranean. They are wonderful cooks and wonderful hospitality. If you ever know Armenian, they'll invite you over on Sunday and they'll put out like 20 plates of food in front of you. They loved all kinds of baked and seasoned vegetables, and so they're very friendly people. The Armenians, as as a church, aren't so friendly with Catholics because of our religious differences, but they're a lot more friendly than the Georgians, who tend to be more isolated. So Armenia was a big defender, big collaborator with the Crusaders.
Mm-hmm.
And a famous Armenian by the Thoros his daughter married a relative of yours, AJ.
Yep.
You remember her name right off the top? Or
Mm.
his daughter married a famous crusader. I forget if it was.
Yeah, Baldwin. Baldwin, who becomes king of Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, and he was first prince of Edessa.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it was about 100 years after the Crusading period came to end that half the Armenian church came into communion with the Roman church, and that was at the Council of Florence, I believe. Oh no, it was a decree in the 14th century from the popes to the Armenians. So the Armenians have always been closer to the west. They have their own form of writing, which is, if you don't know their form of writing, it's completely unintelligible. It's not Greek, it's not Arabic, it's not Cyrillic. It's something that they've handed down from ancient times. And if you see, it's not going to be easy to get news about what's going on in Armenia from that point of view. Well, you bring it up to modern times. They were conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and they suffered many brutal reprisals, genocides, ethnicides, which culminated at the end of the First World War, where the Turks attempted to massacre them to the last man. And I think something like 900,000 of them were put to death, starved to death, men, women, children, babies, in addition to another about 300,000 Assyrians and Syriacs and other Christians of that area. It wasn't just Armenians.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us up to the Treaty of Versailles. You want to take it from there, AJ, and say what happened to them? Did they get any hope from that? Were they betrayed?
Well, in the Treaty of Versailles, Armenia was given to be under the protection of the United States, but the American Bolshevik, as we pointed out in our show on how the Wall Street funded the Bolshevik Revolution, the American Bolshevik Woodrow Wilson uh, turned his back on his duties to protect Armenia, and so they are still without American protection to this very day.
So the Bolsheviks actually invade them and take them over and make them part of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
They were under the Soviet Union a long time. In that short period of freedom between the fall of the Ottoman Empire and their conquest by the Russians, they had independence. And the Russians promised them independence. And once the Soviet Union fell, all the little parts, all the SSRs, all the Soviet Socialistic Republics got their own independence. And Armenia was supposed to get more of its territory where the Armenians lived, but that promise was never kept. So shortly in 1992, I think it is, a war breaks out between Armenian SSR and Azerbaijan SSR. So let me tell you something about Azerbaijan. It takes its name from an ancient people that lived in the area called the Azeris, but the modern people are a Turkish group that moved in when the Turks came to Asia Minor. So the Turks themselves aren't from Turkey. They're from more like Tajikistan and Kazakhstan and Eastern Central Asia. But as Central Asia dried out, they migrated and they conquered and territories, and they ethnicized or genocided anyone in their way. They're very the Turks throughout history are known to be a very bloodthirsty, vicious people that will slit your throat in the night just to have your house. And I don't think anyone in the Mideast would disagree with me, especially not the Arabs even. And they founded a thing called the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire dominated theirs for a long while. So the Azerbaijani used the name of the region to kind of claim that they've been living there all along. And Azerbaijan was a worthless piece of land and swamp. Until like the 1880s, they discovered oil there, and American investors have been there in Baku since then, helping develop the oil in the Caspian Sea. So much so that if you go to Baku, you'll see oil fields going out even to the water of the Caspian Sea for miles and miles, kind of like you used to see the oil fields in Russia and Texas and Oklahoma in the beginning of the 20th century. And they're Muslim, and they've never really gotten along with the Armenians, because the Armenians now on the south side, the west side, and the east side are surrounded by Muslims who have been taking their territory and eating it away over the centuries. And well, everyone knows that Islam is a religion that tells its followers to conquer the world and kill anyone who disagrees with them in matters of religion. So you want to talk about the War of '92, AJ? You have some details on that?
Let's see here.
Who started it? Who won it? The one thing about the Armenian people, and we're going to see, is they are really tough cookies. They're like that little dog that is much more vicious than your wolf dog that you have. They're tough people. They're very militant. They kept the spirit of the Crusades and their deep Christian faith.
So they had a little war like they're doing right now. Took place in the late 80s to May 1994. And well, they actually took parts of Azerbaijan. A little Armenia did.
Yeah, I think they increased the size of the country something like by 20 or 30%, because there was this valley called, what's it called, Nagorno-Karabakh? What's it?
Yeah. That.
Maybe you can attempt to pronounce it better than I.
Nagorno Karabakh.
Nagorno-Karabakh. Okay, we'll say that region, that valley, was inhabited by like 60% Armenians and 40% Azerbaijan, and they wanted to be part of Armenia, but the Azerbaijanis want to say, no, you're part of us, and so that's where the dispute came over. And at the end of the war, the Armenians had liberated that zone and all the zones in between it where Azerbaijanis left. And at the end of that war, for the sake of peace, the Armenians left Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijani left Armenia, and about 300,000 people on both sides, or 500,000 people both sides, changed where they lived. So they'd be living in a country that was of their same ethnicity. And that war ended in a way, but not really ended. They've been trying to negotiate peace. The Azerbaijanis will not accept peace, because in Islam, you can never accept that a Christian conquers you. You are obliged by that superstition to fight on until the end of time, which is basically why Islamic nations have conquered more territory over the centuries and generally lost it, because unless they're face to face with a strong Christian country that has a strong sense of identity, they win out because they never give up. Okay, so they never accepted peace, the Armenians, and they've always been shooting across the border and picking people off, a few each year, and until recently. So
yeah, it was, a little gun, fire a few shots, have some talks, then peace for a good long few months. Then a school of Armenian school in Los Angeles gets vandalized by some Azerbaijanis in LA. Then things go quiet again until Sunday afternoon.
yeah, so Azerbaijan has been making these threats against Armenia lately. Azerbaijan, if you want to know, has about 10 million people. Armenia has about 2.5 million people. The military budget Azerbaijan, because they have an oil industry, exceeds the entire national budget of Armenia. Azerbaijan can call up 3 million military reserves, and the Azerbaijanis can call up, I think it's like 1.6 million. But the actual active military, I think, is much larger than the Armenian side. The Armenians are patriots, and they're willing to serve in the old-fashioned way, like 18 to 45, every man in the country.
And women.
And women, too. So the Azerbaijanis started this one. I think they came across at nighttime with a attack helicopter, 15 drones, and tanks.
And they lost them all.
Yeah, they started shelling civilian communities. Well, You can have better military equipment, but it's having good fighters that really counts in the end. So
We 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 could talk about the probably trainers.
yeah, let's get to that. So the Armenia now, so Armenia declared martial law in the affected zones, and then they called up all their reserves in the country. Azerbaijan just recently, I think a few hours ago, did partial mobilization. So now we've gone from a shooting conflict to open war. They haven't yet declared war on each other, but I imagine that's going to happen shortly because it was only a ceasefire, I think, in '94. So I think they are in a state of war.
Mm-hmm.
And well, where are the other countries? I mean, why isn't anyone saying hands off Armenia? I haven't heard anything from any Western nations. And to show you something of the economics, there is a natural gas pipeline going from Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, through Georgia, around, not into Armenia, but around Turkey, through Turkey, then through Greece, and then to Italy, brings natural gas to Italy. And so Italy is buying natural gas from Azerbaijan, even though it's very far away. It's a very long pipeline. A lot of money in that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to myself, there's something fishy about this, because no sooner does Trump appoint Barrett, who went to Masonic University, to the Supreme Court, that Azerbaijan begins its war against Armenia. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should we be suspicious? I mean, I said to myself, I wonder if the Freemasons have anything to do with this. Is there any connection between Washington and Azerbaijan as for any reason? So AJ, you did the research and you found something about the National Guard.
Yeah. So we're just looking up the numbers, seeing it how fair of a fight it is. I mean, it's pretty fair if it's just between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's pretty fair. When you look into the supporters and uh, international aid people who give them aid or training and stuff, and you look down the list, you see the red, white, and blue. You click that, and it takes you down the list to where it says USA since 2000, but in 2000 they were told they couldn't do anything for Azerbaijan, but they got a waiver in 2001.
Yeah, there's actually a federal law that prevents the United States from military assisting Azerbaijan because of its human rights record. 2001. That's interesting. That would be President Trump. No,
Bush.
President Bush. So there's a law against it, but he gives a waiver. Isn't that so Masonic? And so
Hmm.
what happens? The U.S. starts actually helping Azerbaijan.
Yeah, the Oklahoma National Guard goes to Baku, gives them training. Um, but also in that time frame, I was like, you wanted to know the Masonic
Yeah, I
connection.
said there must be a Masonic connection. Why would Bush, all of us, we know the Bush family is one of the families that are part of the Brown Brothers Harriman, the Skull and Bones operative nectar. They're not Skull and Bones. Prescott Bush was Skull and Bones, but his son was not Skull and Bones. I don't think it's gonna. Maybe it's, no, he was a Skull and Bones too. So we know that they're Masons. So I said this smells fishy. Look up a Masonic connection. And what did you find, AJ?
In the year 2000, Azerbaijan's Masonic Lodge was started in Washington, D.C., and in 2001, with the help of the Masonic Lodge of Moscow and the Lodge in D.C. for Azerbaijan, through 2008, the Lodge was started formally in Baku.
So the Masonic Lodge of Azerbaijan for an Islamic nation is founded by a joint cooperative effort of the Masonic Lodges of Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, and Moscow, Russia, the capital of the Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
We've been telling you that Russia has been since the revolution began, simply an agent of Freemasonry worldwide, and the communism is just a theatrical curtain. What they really are is Masons. And here we have hard proof evidence. All the rhetoric between America and Russia being enemies, not cooperating, it's just a game. It is just a facade, because in truth, both lodges are cooperating together. But why would they be founding a lodge in Armenia? I mean, it's like, who
Oh,
would be Armenia's enemy that would be an enemy of the lodge?
Azerbaijan.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Armenia, the Christians. So,
Hmm.
um, is this an alliance against to wipe Armenia off the face of the map? Is that what we're looking at? So it's not only that, I think we sold them military equipment, didn't we?
Hmm. Yep.
And so, well, you know, well, maybe we're just being critical. Maybe the Oklahoma National Guard was over there doing things perfectly innocent and there's nothing to hide. And they have an actual website, except that as soon as the war breaks out, what happened to the Oklahoma National Guard website?
Um, it's down.
So all the photos of them working side by side with Azerbaijani military officials,
Hmm.
it's all hidden now. So we don't
Hmm.
know who they were working with. So, you know, if I was a judge in court and the evidence disappeared before the trial, I would say that pretty much certifies the Oklahoma National Guard was actually training some of the commanders or actually troops that are now attacking and killing Christians in Armenia.
Hmm.
And they might be doing it with actually hand-me-down equipment from the National Guard, artillery pieces, ammunition,
Hmm.
guns, and trained. They might even have U.S. military advisors
Hmm.
directing the fighting against Azerbaijan, Armenians right now.
Hmm.
And has Trump said anything about this conflict?
No.
So this is very disturbing. Your taxpayers' money is being used in a long-term plan to genocide a Christian nation, one of the last Christian nations of the Mideast.
Hmm.
And this is, as we said before, would never have happened if Christians in America formed a
Christian party.
so, our indolence, our inactivity is leading to the death, or has led. We already talked about how it's led to death of more than 200 million people. But we can't ignore this anymore. We have to form a Christian party for America. I mean, that's just common sense.
Hmm.
So, do you have any information more about what's going on in the war there between the two, about losses on each side, or what?
Uh, Unconfirmed about 200 so about dead on Armenia's side, including civilians. A few hundred on the Azerbaijani side. That includes civilians. They released the Armenian military released some names of some of the Christian soldiers who died last night. And please forgive me, everybody, but I'm going to try to read them. God. Azurmanyan Hazmek Sambatov, no, born in 1985. Vardanya Lernik Arigovic, born in 1978. Vinyasan Gregory Levovich, born in 1979. Gachat Gachatran Ovic Leovich, born in 1990. Minatsek and Minatsa Kenyan Ashot Koyovich, born in 1979. Arturian Askin Andrenkovich, born in 1997. Martian Arsen Garikovich, born in 1999. Yeltsin Ruben Mietskinovich, born in 2000. Torsian David Miktorovich, born in 2001. Philip Cian Taran Juranovic, born in 2000. Bayas Makorovich Gregorian, born in 2001. Kilgatsian Ganich Edgarovich, born in 2001. Sakarian Eric Sambatkovich, born in 2001. Margarian Karen Varamovich, born in 2000. Onyan David Eduardovich, born in 2000. Osiganin Vervis Arzinovich, born in 2001.
A lot of young men there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that says about the Armenian morale, the Armenian spirit?
That they're strong, they love their country, they love their faith, they love their people, willing to volunteer. Volunteer at their age to volunteer that they are accepted is age 15 to 49, or even now the age limit is taken off. Every person, every citizen drops everything, their work, their loved ones, and joins in the fight for their country.
This is a wonderful example of patriotism. Most people don't know that a third of everyone in Armenia lives under the poverty line. So they have very little, and yet they're willing to give a lot. And this shows that they have an excellent Christian spirit and love for their own country, because they're not dying for war. They're not dying for a dispute. They're dying to defend their people from genocide, because that's what the Azerbaijanis would do to them. Anyone who knows anything about the Mideast would know that. Most Muslim people, if given the chance, would exterminate their Christian neighbors, and without the slightest little regret, just if they got the chance. If they know they're not going to get any reprisal for it, they'll do it. So this is a terrible conflict, and we're going to bring you news about it on a weekly basis. And I've already gotten calls as head of President Order Militaris in Montana. If we're going to do anything there, we don't have the ability to do anything there. And people ask me, veterans from around the world are asking what to ask. I advise you just go to the local Armenian embassy or consulate in your country and volunteer if you want to volunteer. And if they need volunteers, and it's up to them to decide, that would be the standard practice. And as far as I know, since the war is on the Armenian-Azerbaijani borders, if you're a citizen of Europe, there's not going to be any conflict if you happen to if you're involved in military conflict and you end up injuring or killing a Turkish soldier, because the Turkish military units are in Azerbaijan, and they're fighting on that side of the border, because if they fought on the other side of the border, they would be considered NATO forces and they'd violate their NATO treaty, as much as I understand those laws. But there's reports that Turkey is importing terrorists from Syria to assist in the war effort. So, and then they're flying them from Turkey over to Azerbaijan. Armenia, unfortunately, doesn't have an air force capable of defending themselves, although they're getting some Russian defense on that point of view. So
yeah, you can't really fly into Armenia unless you're not Russian air plane from Russia or coming into Russia, into Georgia. I mean, you could probably fly into Georgia, then drive into Armenia that way. Or you could pull the old Lee Marvin movie, Dirty Dozens, put on the Azerbaijan armband, sneak across the border, take that off, put the armband on of Armenia.
You might get shot during this conflict. The one thing I highly recommend to everyone in the world, whether you're interested in helping Armenia out or not, is do not fly on any Turkish airline.
Hmm.
Okay, Turkish airlines give very cheap rates to Europe and around the Mideast. Any Turkish airline flight now might be a possible attack of some kind of group that wants to make a political statement. I advise you
Hmm.
not to fly on Turkish airlines, not to enter the Turkey whatsoever, and especially if you have any intention of going to Armenia, do not enter Turkey. If the Armenians see that you've entered Turkey, they won't let you enter their country. They'll assume you're a spy. And if you've been to Turkey and have Turkish stamps on your passport, they won't let you enter the country. Pretty much sure they'll assume you're a spy. So
Hmm.
I think Christians can send a strong message everywhere after what Turkey just did to the Hagia Sophia and the Church of the Korah to boycott Turkish products. Don't buy anything saying it's from Turkey. Don't buy olive oil. Don't buy dried figs. Don't buy anything from Turkey. Boycott Turkey for what they're doing
Yeah.
because it's just intolerable. And I think even the Greek prime minister is worried about it. Didn't he just meet with Pompeo? Or is he meeting with Pompeo today in Crete?
He just met with them. He said, pull your planes out of Turkey, move them to Crete, move everything of the U.S. out of that air base in Turkey that holds the 90 nuclear bombs.
Yeah, crazily, it's absolutely insanity that the air at the air base in Circulik in Turkey, which is owned by Turkey but leased to the United States, there are 90 nuclear bombs capable of being deployed on SAC bombers. And this is an old type of warfare when you would send a bomber at high altitude and drop an atomic bomb. The Russians military today can take those planes out as soon as they get off the ground because the Russians have very advanced, high speed, and very accurate missiles. So it's a way of deploying nuclear bombs that's completely useless in modern warfare. Those bombs should be removed from Encirclet base and brought back to the United States. And none of them should be given to the Turks. There's
Hmm.
currently the Turks, with permission of Washington, could deploy like 49 of them.
Hmm.
And got, you know, I won't use the divine name, but heaven forbid what the Turks would use those bombs for. So I think the Greek prime minister is very sane in asking that. And America's been pressured a long time by a lot of neighbors of Turkey to remove the nuclear weapons from that base. It's just too dangerous. The Turks could overrun it at any moment. But I think it shows the close alliance between the Masonic lodges of Istanbul and Washington, D.C. Why the nuclear weapons. It's a way of saying the Masons of the U.S. are completely behind Turkey, and Turkey can do whatever it wants, and we're going to stand by them thick or thin, and don't you dare attack Turkey. I think that's the message being given out. And
Hmm.
their cooperation, the U.S. cooperation and the Turkish cooperation are in Azerbaijan basically confirms that. So if you're concerned about the Armenian genocide, I think we could be witnessing something in the future that will make that look tiny in comparison unless the Christians around the world start writing to their leaders and telling them that they must come to the aid of Armenia, not Azerbaijan here.
Hmm.
Armenia is the wrong nation, and Armenia is the victim because you can't claim that only Muslims have a right to live in their areas. You have to claim that Christians do too. Why did NATO bomb Serbian Christians? Because the Kosovians wanted independence, because the Kosovians were Muslim. Well, the people in Nagorno-Karabakh are Christian and they wanted independence, so why aren't we coming to the defense of them? Just
Hmm.
because they're Armenians, Christians, so they don't get defense? See, it's two-faced, and the Freemasons are two-faced. They always will be two-faced. That's their nature of them. They are scum,
Hmm.
okay? If your government leaders are Masons, you got to put the fire under the butt, because unless they're going to lose political capital, they won't do anything, okay? So I'd say Trump is pretty vulnerable. He's headed into election. If he gets a strong kickback from Christians saying, you stop this now and you come to the support of Armenia, we're not going to vote for you, he might do something. I'd say he might because Biden's Mason too, so the Masons are in control no matter who wins or what. But
Hmm.
if Trump has to deliver to the Masons, then he has to win. And so maybe that's possible to influence in some way. But I think pressure should be put on the Oklahoma National Guard to stop their military collaboration in Azerbaijan. That's completely intolerable. And to find out, I think the new journalists in Oklahoma need to investigate what precisely was the Oklahoma National Guard doing in Azerbaijan. How many people in the Oklahoma National Guard are Muslim? How many Muslims came from around the country to join their National Guard? And were any of them radicalized in Azerbaijan? Because this might explain what was discovered a few miles from your house, AJ, wasn't?
Yeah,
What did they discover?
IEDs.
A cache of IEDs in western Kansas. For those who don't know the geography of the United States, Kansas is right north of Oklahoma. Yeah, where would those come from? Because as far as I know, the Mexican cartels don't use IEDs. That's only Muslim radicals.
Yeah.
And as soon as they discovered, the local authorities weren't allowed to investigate, were they?
Mm-mm.
What happened?
Now it's controlled by the FBI.
They move in, they took over the investigation, and everyone went silent.
Yep. In a few months now.
It sounds like a cover-up to me. And so what is really going on in the world is not what it seems. If you just dig down, you'll find out that it's not what it seems. And this finishes our report on the Armenia-Azerbaijani war. And now we're going to talk about 9/11 to show you that 9/11 is not what it seems. We already talked about the reports that showed that 9/11 was a complete false flag, and the people in the planes are actually executed by agents of the US government, CIA, deep state, to engineer this whole thing. But now we have some really hard evidence to show who knew about it. So 9/11, World Trade Center. Let's talk about the lease of the World Trade Center. Most people don't know it was actually built by the city of New York, and it was put on lease in 2001. Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, the man who was outbid by the Vornado Realty is Larry Silverstein, a local guy from New York, born in Brooklyn, and not much is known because they don't give all of his autobiography.
So he's not really a big player in Brooklyn. He's one of the small players in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is he was the guy who had leased the building when it was hit. I mean, when 9/11 took place, he was holding the lease.
Yeah.
And the terms of that lease is if the building was damaged, he had to repair or rebuild it. So if you knew that was going to happen as a Freemason, you certainly wouldn't want to lease that building. So looking at what happened to Larry Silverstein, it looks to me he was set up because the city puts that building up for a bid in what, February?
Yeah.
And Larry Silverstein and his group bid $3,220,000,000. But someone outbid them by 30 million. And who was that?
The Vornado Realty.
Vornado Realty. You know what the odds of two people bidding at those high numbers to get within 1% of each other on a bid? That's how high it is. 0% chance of that ever happening. So that means, well, if that's true, that means that the people who outbid Silverstein had inside information of what was in his bid and just upped their offer to beat him. Now that bid was submitted to New York City Hall.
Yep.
And what is right across the street from New York City Hall? I mean right across the street, and meaning in the sense of literally right across the street.
The private bank of Brown's Brothers Harriman.
You mean the one founded by 12 Skull and Bones members back in 1913?
Yep.
Abel Harriman, whose mother founded the eugenics movement and Planned Parenthood, who hired Bill Gates' parents and made him wealthy? You mean the Brown Brothers Harriman who hired Prescott Bush, the father and grandfather of 2 U.S. presidents?
Yep.
You mean Brown Brothers Harriman, the private bank that hired Prescott Bush, who was the grandfather of the man who started allowing military assistance to go to Azerbaijan,
Hmm.
who was president when 9/11 took place,
Yep.
who's who had a personal relationship with Bin Laden's family since the 70s,
Yep.
who was being investigated by the FBI New York City office in World Trader 7 building that just happened to explode all by itself hours after the attack.
Hmm.
You know, these coincidences are just piling up one after the other. It's just completely well, let's not just jump the gun. So this group that outbid Larry Silverstein, do they have any connection with any president of the United States?
Yeah.
Which one?
President Donald Trump.
And can you explain to us this relationship?
In 1986, the Interstate Properties and Donald Trump each bought approximately 20% of Alexander's failing retailer, whose real estate holdings included a store that occupied the entire block of East 58 and 59th Street in Lexington and 3rd Avenues in Manhattan. In 1988, they each raised their stakes to 27% of the company, but Trump pledged his interest as collateral for a personal loan from Citicorp. And in 1991, Trump was forced to turn over his holdings to Citibank. In 1992, Roth and Alexander's creditors forced Alexander's into bankruptcy. Alexander emerged from bankruptcy in 1993 as Real Estate Investment Trust. That same year, Vornado was converted into the Real Estate Investment Trust, Vornado Realty Trust, in 1995. Vornado bought Citicorp's interest in Alexander's, so the part that Trump had, they bought out from Citicorp.
And Vaughners goes on to be the one who makes this miraculously winning bid.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's a business partner of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are if Trump knew something, he'd know something.
Mm-hmm.
And they won the winning bid, but why did Larry Silverstein end up getting it?
On February 15, 2001, the Port Authority announced that Vornado Realty Trust had won the bid for the 99-year lease for the World Trade Center, offering a $3.25 billion bid. Silverstein's Properties was outbid by $30 million by Vornado. However, Vornado balked over the lease terms and possible tax liabilities. Silverstein signed a lease for the World Trade Center in April 2001, 5 months before September 11th.
So Vornado wins the bid on February 15th, but in March, they back out of it after winning it.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if they knew something was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when they backed out of it, was Silverstein given any due time to think about his offer, or was he rushed into signing a contract?
He was given 14 days.
Now, I would say he was rushed into one. And I know a little about real estate and a little about Jews in real estate. And I can tell you one thing. When a Jewish investor has his eye on a property, he'll make rash decisions and rush into something. And if you know that about Jews and you're an unscrupulous person, you can set a Jew up to buy a bad property, okay? By playing a game with him, making him think he lost the bid, and at the last moment saying he didn't lose the bid, he'll rush right in there and sign the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, he was given 14 days. Now, we don't know yet the exact day the 14-day period began or the exact day it ended, but he signed the deal on what day?
He finalized it on April 26, 2001.
April 26, 2001. Well, you know, that date, when I say April 26, I go, whoa, 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 because You know who was born on April 20th and died on April 30th?
Mm-hmm.
And who was that?
Adolf Hitler.
So if you were a Nazi spy group taken up into the CIA and your duty was to swindle someone who was a Jew into getting the lease on the World Trade Center so that when you destroyed it in a false flag operation, none of your Masonic friends would suffer any losses, but a Jew would take it. What better date to have him sign it than a day between April 20th and April 30th? Wouldn't that be just a perfect kind of Nazi thing to do?
Yeah.
So this is, I'd say this is, what's this, circumstantial evidence, of course, but it's extremely suspicious. But there's one last flag on the feather in this argument that really strengthens it a lot. So as part of the deal, Larry Silverstein was obligated to rebuild that building if it should be attacked by terrorism. And of course, it had been attacked in 95, 96. So his investing group was going to get that insurance. Insurance back then covered that, and he got that insurance. And when the building was destroyed, he had to make a claim. And the insurance companies didn't want to pay, so he had to go to court, and he won $4.5 billion, I think. It cost $9 billion to rebuild it, so he's still in debt $4.5 billion. So he sued the airlines. He sued all the airlines whose planes allegedly crashed into that building. And in a lawsuit like that, he has the right to get all the information at once. He could send court subpoenas to everyone in the U.S. and find out exactly what happened. He could dig into all that information we just talked about in our 9/11 show, and he could find out what we found out, that those people's planes didn't crash into those buildings, and they were taken down on a tarmac somewhere in New England, and they were executed. They were gassed to death to cover it up, and that specially designed planes strong enough to destroy those buildings and carrying explosive into them. So he would have found that out. The court would have found it out. The public would have found it out. So if he sued the airlines, that lawsuit, according to Masonic necessity, cannot go anywhere. It has to completely never get resolved. And did he sue the airlines?
Oh, yeah.
And now it's 19 years later. A normal lawsuit takes 5 years. Is that lawsuit ended?
Mm-mm.
Surprise, surprise, surprise. But now we're going to add the ice cream on the cake. The company that Silverstein bought the insurance from to insure the World Trade Center, that he had to sue to get them to pay, who was that company?
Swiss Reinsurance Company. And
now, wait, Swiss Insurance, I don't think anyone has ever heard of this company. I know a lot of companies in the US. I have never heard of it. Reinsurance, too. It is a company that insures things over. So Swiss Insurance, is that just a name? Or are they from Switzerland?
they're based in Zurich, Switzerland, but
where were they founded? I mean, is it just, let's always find out where a bank comes from to know who's behind them. Where were they founded?
Was founded on 19 December 1863 by the Helvetia General Insurance Company in St. Gallen, Switzerland.
St. Gallen. Where have I heard that name before? St. Gallen, Switzerland is the headquarters of the mafia that's running the Vatican now. Isn't that right? And a year after Bergoglio takes power in the Vatican, did you know Trump got like a $250 million loan from Deutsche Bank, whose president and CEO went to the business school in St. Gallen, Switzerland? It's amazing. This little town just shows up on all these interesting facts. So I suppose the next time you see a picture of President Trump shaking the hand of Bergoglio, maybe you should look at their expressions on their faces to see how actually friendly they are to one another, because according to Bergoglio's intelligence office in Argentina, he's a Freemason. And that would make sense then. We're connecting the dots for you here at Ordo Militaris Radio TV, so you understand better what's really going on in the world. And we're not saying Trump knew about 9/11, picked up the phone, warned his friend, that they pulled out their bid so they could shaft Silverstein with taking the loss on the building. And they partially compensated him with a friendly bank that has 250 billion in assets and so could afford taking the loss because they were just using some of their Nazi gold that they had stored away in their banks from World War II. We're not saying that, but that might be what happened.
Mhm. Yeah. So you got the first billion, few billion. Now he's suing the airlines, which is 19 years overdue for the amount
He needs another about 4.5 billion to pay off his debts to rebuild
yeah.
that building. This kind of brings to mind that what hit the news today that Lushenko, the strongman who runs Belarus, which is the little country north of the Ukraine and borders Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Russia, of course.
Mhm.
He came out and he publicly admitted today that he was told by the International Monetary Fund to impose the COVID lockdown on his country. And if he did, they'd pay him $1 billion, but he refused. So this seems to be how the Masonic lodges have gotten this COVID scam to encompass the whole world. They're actually using money from the international banks to pay off politicians to the tunes of billions of dollars to get them to go along. And this just ties a ribbon on the whole thing. If you focus on who's involved in all these deals and trace back the money, you will find Masonic lodge members at every point and junction of history in the last 100 years. And this is not a coincidence. You need to open your eyes and realize the Masonic system is not your friend. They're playing you. Okay.
Mhm.
They're playing you. And you need to vote Christian Party for America.
Yeah.
Or form a Christian party in your own country. You can do that.
Yeah.
Because without a Christian party, this criminal organization is going to keep killing people by the hundreds, thousands, and millions, and using it to make money for themselves and grab more of your assets and more control over you as a person to enslave you, because that's all they
Mhm.
want.
Yeah. It's just mind blowing and just creepy how everything going on in the world is all connected.
Yeah, well, that's the purpose of Freemasonry, to all connect it. But if Trump knew about 9/11 before 9/11, then they have something on him. He's a conspirator, and therefore he's can be blackmailed or is blackmailed. And would be the perfect president for the United States, because then they could tell him exactly what to do day after day, because if they didn't, they could just expose he knew about 9/11. They might even have the phone call where they told him the thing was going to go down in February of 2001. And that would be enough to get him convicted.
Yeah. Now there's something else about Trump that came out last night I shared with you.
Remind me.
He uses phrases to hypnotize the people.
Oh yeah, it's a very good article. It appeared in Fortune magazine. Um, what they mean there in that article about Trump's ability to hypnotize is a political strategy. So his political strategy is he finds out what would really convince you to vote for him. Then he says he's in favor of it, but then he never does anything about it, because his interest is hooking you on his fishing hook and reeling you in to vote for him. He's not actually interested in helping you. Okay. And this is the strategy behind Make America Great Again. It's really hoodwink you royally. Again, we've seen this in his tactics. He promised to build the wall and he never did it. He promised to help Christian refugees come to America. He did the exact opposite. He promised to help Christians in the Mideast, and I don't know where that help is, but he continued to help Azerbaijan. And he claimed victory over ISIS, and ISIS is still there. And this is just the beginning of things he claimed to do. He claims he's conservative and appoints people to the Supreme Court that push gay marriage. And he just appointed a woman who graduated from the Masonic University of Tennessee, and he's claiming she's the who is totally in favor of the lockdown and against constitutional rights and for the shutting of Christian churches. And he has the gall to say, I have never disappointed you. I've appointed someone who's totally in favor of the Constitution, who's a great, excellent, intellectual, devout Christian, blah, 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 blah. So what he says is to get you to not look at what he's doing, but as Christians, we're obliged to judge him by his deeds. And on that score, what can we say? AJ, what would you say on his deeds?
They are very misleading. They are political theater to get you hooked on him. And then once he has you, it's just like he gets you hooked, and he repeats it multiple times, make sure he has you. And we see how mindless zombies the Trump people are when we talk to him about the Christian party. So we gotta break that hold. We gotta, I don't know, whatever's the thing that breaks that hypnotism, the snap of the finger, the noise, whatever it is. We gotta bring him back to reality.
And your faith requires you. It requires you. It's not just a recommendation. It requires you under grave obligation to judge, that is to discern, not on what a person says, but on what they do. And if Trump, regardless of what he says, does or doesn't do anything, then everything he's telling you is just a lie. Now, I don't agree he's helped some big business and he helped some businesses bring some jobs back to America. I don't agree with that, but he's destroyed middle-class entrepreneurship by supporting the lockdown. And don't tell me he's not responsible for the lockdown. He allowed it to happen. If you see a criminal break into an old lady's house next door with a gun and shoot her dead, and you all the time are sitting there and watching it, you are a co-conspirator in the crime, and you'll be found guilty in court for that because you should have called the police or you should have intervened. And you don't even have any authority or duty to defend your neighbor. You have an obligation in the natural law, but he's president. He has a duty to defend America. He not only has a constitutional duty, he has a duty in the natural law, which is even higher, okay? Just like there was, President Lincoln had no authority to free the slaves in the South, but as president of the United States, he had a higher duty from the natural law to declare them free. And everyone recognizes that. So likewise, Trump has a higher authority in the natural law to prevent the lockdown. But how would he ever do that since his grandfather and Bill Gates' father both worked for the same man, Harriman? Would never do that because he's part of it. He's just a good actor to pretend he's not. They rolled out their best con man from New York to hook Americans. It's not make America great again. His real motto is bleep America again. That's his real motto. Bleep America again.
Looks like we have some breaking news. Russian military jets have defied the country of Georgia and flown into Armenia.
To help defend them?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Russia, I think, is selling military weapons to all sides in this conflict, so.
Yeah.
It's to their interest that at least Armenia not get conquered right away.
So there's that little bit of news.
Let us pray for the Armenian people that defend themselves, and let's pray for Christians everywhere. They wake up, snap out of the narrative control, and begin realizing they have to organize themselves politically and militarily. Otherwise, the Masons are going to exterminate them from the face of the earth in collusion with the Marxists from China and the Muslims from around the world.
Yep. Um, Anything else?
No, I think that covers it. We're bringing you the truth to red pill you, and we hope this helps you to do that. If you like Ordo Militaris Radio TV, please support this apostolate, because it's an apostolate. Neither AJ or I get any salary or any fringe benefits. Anything that you donate goes to get better equipment and technology so we can do more professional production and expand our offerings, and hopefully get servers of our own or on our own connection to the internet so no one can censor us or shut us down. And you go to the bottom of the page for this show at ordo-militaris.net and press the free will subscription button, and you can make a one-time or recurring donation. And we thank the individual the other day who gave $25, and thank you so much for that. So these are all capital pledges, and so they're not, you can't write off this kind of donation, but it helps us do the apostolate. So this is a personal apostolate of AJ, but the equipment is the use of the equipment is donated by Ordo Militaris Inc., because this is all about defending your Christian rights, okay? And the defense of your legal rights is a charitable activity. And here at Ordo Militaris, we're not concerned in political correctness. We're not concerned with kissing up to anyone. We are not politically controlled. We're only concerned about defending Christians in their rights to liberty. And that's why I think this apostolate merits at least your attention when you consider who you're going to support. We're not getting rich over this. We're not getting a penny from it. So please consider supporting Ordo Militaris Radio TV. I think since June, this apostolate's gotten maybe $200 donations. So it's not like most people would say you should give it up after that, you know. But we do this for the love of Christ. It's not even to raise the money. But the money is necessary to improve the equipment that we use and grow the apostolate.
Yeah. Let's see. Tomorrow we're going to begin what we'll conclude on Halloween. We'll tell you tomorrow on the feast day of Saint Michael the Archangel why you should have a devotion to him. And we might throw in a few tad scary bits.
Okay, St. Michael's very important against the forces of darkness, which are certainly all marshaled against us. So great feast of St. Michael. Listen in if you really want to learn some rather unknown aspects of true devotion to St. Michael. We're not going to quote from crazy organizations founded by Masons like Society of Angels and things like that. We're going to just bring true Christian biblical teaching about devotion to St. Michael, and this is real devotion, and this will make your spiritual life a lot more effective and make your prayers a lot more efficacious, and enable you to get St. Michael's protection when you really need it, and in ways you can never imagine you could get. So I encourage you to listen in tomorrow to our show for the true devotion to St. Michael the Archangel.
This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.